The Justice Department is going to return to delivering justice. The Justice Department's not going to persecute Americans like the Biden Justice Department did with January 6 defendants. The Trump Justice Department is not going to go after parents outraged by gender chaos in schools. They're not going to go after pro-life Christians, including putting 75-year-old Christians in prison for praying at abortion clinics. The Trump Justice Department, under the leadership of Pam Bondi, is going to make sure that justice is blind, that we restore our justice system so we don't have to worry about a woke and weaponized justice system.
All right, guys, it was official. It happened yesterday on the calendar. I want to put up this map for you. We're on that sort of glide path to the inauguration, right? The election happened. The electoral college met in all 50 states yesterday. Electors certified the election. Donald Trump, 312 electoral votes. He is the president-elect officially. By the way, a 1,547-page bill is being debated in Congress right now to fund government for 3 more months as they kick the can down till March, when at least Republicans will be in charge. A lot going on Capitol Hill about that. Mike Davis of the Article 3 Project is here, and we're going to talk China and national security, plus this drone issue. What's going on? I've got some amazing insight that you're not going to hear anywhere else. Before I do that, though, if you are running your business or the person in charge of the finances for your business, you're going to want to hear this. I've switched over. Ramp is a game changer, right? If you are dealing with the expenses, Ramp gives you a virtual and physical card. It's a Visa card that you can give to your employees. It lets you establish limits, all sorts of things, vendor payments, accounting. This could be a game changer for your business. It'll save you time. It will save you money. It is the corporate expense management software that you need for your company. It gives your finance team control and insight in your spending. No more chasing receipts around and finding. It literally simplifies everything. I had a guest on here the other day that said it changed how they do business. And we're talking small businesses. This is like, if you got 5 employees, it makes your life, you probably even need it more because you've got limited employees to do this. It's easy to use. To get started, it's like 15 minutes. They issue virtual and physical cards, like the Visa cards, to start making payments in less than 15 minutes. And you get $250 right now. The holiday season, who doesn't need $250? Just go to ramp.com/Spicer, ramp.com/Spicer. Cards are issued by Sutton and Celtic Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. All right. By the way, big breaking news. Elon Musk tweeted out last night, hashtags are out. No more needing hashtags, which is good because I think a lot of people still wondered what a hashtag was for. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Lots of conversation these days about my post that I put out there about Trump can fire anyone because of the case that I filed, Spicer v. Biden. Trump can fire any person he wants now because the Biden administration went and argued in court and won that they could do that. So just check out my newsletter, SeanSpicer.com, or follow me on social media on Twitter or on Instagram. I'm posting all about this. But this is huge for President Trump because of this case. And it was Russ Vought and I that were the only ones that put our names on this case. He could do this. It was unbelievable. A bunch of new announcements coming out. But we've got a great show ahead for you. Mike Davis from the Article 3 Project is here. He's going to break down all things Department of Justice, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, everything that's happening, plus where Trump's cases stand. And then we are going to talk to Guy Taylor. He is the author of the Threat Status Podcast. He's going to tell us what's going on in terms of these drones. What does the government know? What is it telling us? What it's not telling us? Trust me when I tell you, you will not hear this conversation anywhere else. Before I bring in Mike Davis, though, I want to tell you about 120 Life. Right now, I learned this, that the number one indicator for mortality is high blood pressure. And it's an unfortunate statistic, but 1 in 2 adults have it, right? So 50% of us, folks, if you didn't take math in college like me, then you are a walking time bomb. You, not Big Pharma, though, can really make a big difference on this. It's not just about taking a pill. It's how do you naturally get your blood pressure down to a good place. That's where 120 Life comes in. It's a blend of great tasting superfruit juices. I'm telling you, I've been drinking this now for like 3 weeks. I mean, I would chug this thing. It's amazing. It tastes so good. The best part about it is it actually helps your blood pressure. It's formulated with ingredients that have been shown to naturally take your blood pressure down. No pills. You should try it yourself risk-free right now. You've got a 2-week trial pack that you can get and get your money back. So go to 120life.com, use the code SPICER to save 15% and get free shipping. So that's life at 120life.com. Use code SPICER. And by the way, these guys are so sure that this product is going to work for you and it will noticeably lower your blood pressure in 2 weeks that they will give you your money back if you're not satisfied. Again, you can't get a better deal right now than this. So you've got nothing to lose. Go to 120life.com, 120life.com. All right. It's my pleasure to bring in the founder and leader of the Article 3 project who ran nominations on the Hill in the Senate for the first Trump administration, Mr. Mike Davis. Mike Davis, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's just start with the picks that President Trump has made. You were very, very active before the election, talking about the importance of putting strong leadership back into these law enforcement agencies, including the DOJ. What do you think about his picks so far?
President Trump keeps hitting grand slam after grand slam with his cabinet picks and even sub-cabinet picks. You see this with Pam Bondi as President Trump's pick to serve as the next attorney general. She's been Florida's attorney general for 8 years. She's unquestionably qualified. She's bold. She's fearless. She's a DC outsider, and she's going to bring much needed reforms to a very badly broken Justice Department. And she's going to have a lot of good help with people like Todd Blanche, who's going to be the deputy attorney general, and Emil Bove, who's going to be his deputy, and John Sauer, the solicitor general of the United States, and Gail Slater, my friend, running the antitrust division, and Harmeet Dhillon running the civil rights division. We just keep winning. We keep winning so much from President Trump that we're getting tired of winning, I think.
Yeah, I mean, these are all names we know. I just give people a sense of the seismic shift that this is going to make in terms of how DOJ operates.
The Justice Department is going to return to delivering justice instead of being a woke and weaponized behemoth that goes after political enemies like Trump, his top aides like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, who went to prison for constitutional executive privilege going back 250 years to George Washington. The Justice Department's not going to persecute Americans like the Biden Justice Department did with January 6 defendants, according to the Supreme Court's Fisher ruling last June. The Trump Justice Department is not going to go after parents outraged by gender chaos in schools and the resulting rapes in high school bathrooms. They're not going to go after pro-life Christians, including putting 75-year-old Christians in prison for praying at abortion clinics. The Trump Justice Department, under the leadership of Pam Bondi, is going to make sure that justice is blind, that we restore our justice system so we don't have to worry about a woke and weaponized justice system.
You know, the media tried to make it seem like all these civil employees at DOJ would resign. Number one, is that true? And number two, is that a bad thing?
I hope they do resign, because you know what? Any of these Justice Department employees, whether they're agents or prosecutors or anyone who worked with them on the outside, if they conspired to politicize and weaponize intel agencies and law enforcement against American citizens for non-crimes, not only should they lose their jobs, they should go to prison under conspiracy against rights, 18 U.S.C. Section 241, a very serious federal civil rights felony. And the Biden Justice Department is very well aware of this 18 U.S.C. Section 241 because it's one of Jack Smith's bogus charges against President Trump in the January 6th case in D.C. for the non-crime of objecting to a presidential election, which is allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887 and the First Amendment. They went after Trump, his top aides, his allies, his supporters for non-crimes. That is a crime in itself. That is conspiracy against rights, 18 U.S.C. Section 241. And as they always say, nobody's above the law. If they've done nothing wrong, they have nothing to worry about. If a grand jury in Fort Pierce, Florida, indicts them, then obviously the charges are legitimate, so they better lawyer up.
So Trump in this Meet the Press interview, when Kristen Welker tried to push the limit and talk about him going after his political enemies, basically said, no, I'm focused on the future. My retribution will be success. But then he left the door open for people like Pam Bondi and others to pursue that by saying, look, if these people have committed a crime, they should be dealt with. So if you're these people who are asking Biden potentially for a preemptive pardon, or Biden's asking them if they want one, should they be worried if they didn't? I mean, like, where does that stand? Because I was trying to figure out if Trump's saying, hey, look, I'm not going to go after him, but hey, maybe Pam Bondi does.
Well, I would say this, the biggest tell of all, Sean, is the fact that they're asking for a preemptive pardon. If they've committed no crime, why the hell do they need a pardon? And that is pretty obvious that they know that they've committed a crime, a series of very serious crimes. Again, when you politicize and weaponize intel agencies and law enforcement at every level, federal, state, and local, to go after your political enemies, you have engaged in a very serious federal civil rights criminal conspiracy against rights, 18 USC Section 241. And President Trump, he, as the President of the United States, he has the constitutional authority to order his Attorney General to open a criminal probe or to prosecute someone. Trump's not going to do that. And guess what? He doesn't need to do that because the evidence is so clear. And when the prosecutors present this evidence to a grand jury, whether it's Fort Pierce, Florida, or wherever they choose to present this grand jury, there's a very obvious federal crime, actually a series of crimes.
So let's take one, for example. I find it laughable that everybody dismisses what Liz Cheney did. So first, before we get into the case, just explain to people, because you can do it much better than I can, what these new texts reveal between Liz Cheney and Cassidy Hutchinson, who was that star witness, and why this is a problem. Because I have my issues, but I am not the constitutional expert that you are. What did Liz Cheney do wrong legally?
Well, it seems to me the evidence could indicate that Liz Cheney pressured Cassidy Hutchinson to change her congressional testimony falsely to fit a political narrative. And if that's the case, there are so many problems with that. It could be subornation of perjury, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. There's a whole bunch of crimes that could have been committed here. Now, members of Congress have immunity called speech or debate clause. You know, these same people who said President Trump wasn't immune from a criminal prosecution for his official acts, not his personal misconduct. His official acts are sure going to be clinging to speech or debate clause, congressional immunity. I don't think congressional immunity is going to protect Liz Cheney from criminal charges in this case. And, you know, maybe we'll just have to see if the Trump 47 brings the charges against Liz Cheney, and maybe she can spend a lot of money on lawyers and try to vindicate her legal position like they did to Trump and his top aides and his supporters on January 6th, parents, Christians, people who are still sitting in the DC gulag 4 years after January 6th. I think it's going to be important for the people who pushed this lawfare and election interference, this criminal conspiracy against rights for non-crimes. I think they must face severe legal, political, and financial consequences for their real crimes, including criminal indictments.
Yeah, I want to get to January 6th in just a minute. But let me just continue down the thread with Liz Cheney, because I want to get your expert opinion on this. The thing that I thought was most interesting about this is that Cassidy Hutchinson was represented by counsel. Her lawyer was Stefan Passatino. Liz Cheney went around counsel, from what I can see in these texts, and went straight to Cassidy and said, hey, can we talk? Because Liz Cheney is an attorney, or even if she wasn't, is that in itself a legal violation?
Well, it's an ethics violation for an attorney to talk to a represented party. And Liz Cheney would know that. And I realize that she's probably never been a real lawyer in her life. Maybe her daddy took the bar exam for her because her daddy's given her every job in her life. But she should know as a lawyer, if she passed the bar exam, particularly the professional responsibility part of that, if you're a lawyer, you can't go around the back of another lawyer and talk to their client. That's a very serious
Would the
ethics
speech
violation.
and debate clause protect her on that, or is that could she be disbarred for that?
Well, I mean, there should be disbarment proceedings or at least disciplinary proceedings. She could try to raise that as a legal issue. She might prevail. Who knows? We're kind of Liz Cheney laughed when President Trump tried to bring up presidential immunity, and now she may need her own congressional immunity to save her ass.
Yeah, you mentioned the January 6th folks. President Trump's talked about a pardon there. In my mind, there's two different issues here. There are people that may, and I don't follow every case, but there are people that hit law enforcement or engaged in clear criminal activity. And then after talking to folks like Alan Dershowitz, there are people who got swept up and are being kept in jail. Can you explain where all these people lie? Like, how many of them just got swept up? How many of them potentially are real cases? And what this all means? Because I can't believe the stories I hear where people are sitting in a jail cell without any due process.
I would say this, and I've very publicly advocated this to President Trump. I think President Trump should pardon almost all January 6th defendants. And for the handful who are actually violent against police officers and the like, then those people should have their sentences commuted to a more reasonable sentence, because nothing that happened on January 6th, 2021 calls for a 22-year prison sentence, especially when this Biden Justice Department, at the same time, they've spent an ungodly amount of resources going after January 6th defendants for the last 4 years and politically persecuting them under the Supreme Court's Fisher decision last June. This Biden Justice Department has given amnesty to the much more deadly and destructive BLM and Antifa rioters who caused billions in damage, killed dozens, attacked the Portland federal courthouse on a nightly basis, attacked the White House, St. John's Church, the Secret Service guard station outside the White House, Senator Rand Paul, a senator leaving the White House. When people start caring about BLM and Antifa, I'll start caring about January 6th.
You know, what's interesting about the whole January 6th thing, when you look at how this thing has played out, to your point, I mean, the juxtaposition between the BLM folks and the January 6th folks, I find that fascinating. But I also looked at this IG report, the Inspector General report the other day, that said, well, we couldn't find any direct evidence that FBI agents were there, but there were a bunch of informants. So do you believe that report, or do you believe that should be further investigation into the FBI's role on January 6th?
There definitely should be further investigation. This report said that they had at least 26 FBI paid contractors at January 6th. 23 of them apparently showed up on their own, which I find laughable. But they admit that at least 3 of those FBI paid contractors were working that day on January 6th, right? So what the hell were they doing, right? And so they keep saying that it wasn't a Fedsurrection. Well, we know that at least 26 paid feds, whether they're agents or contractors, it makes no difference. They had 26 people paid by the FBI there on January 6th. And that doesn't include all the other federal agencies. That's just the FBI. That doesn't include federal, state, local outside of the FBI.
Well, also, doesn't it undermine the idea of this being spontaneous? Hey, we heard this thing on the mall. We all marched to the Capitol. Because why would a bunch of informants be there ahead of time if it wasn't premeditated?
Yeah, I always say this, Sean. January 6th was a lawful protest permitted by the National Park Service that devolved into a riot. And there were 3 categories of people who were there that day. There were people who were there peacefully outside, not trespassing. Even if you think they're crazy, even if you think they're wrong, they have an absolute First Amendment right to be there. Then you have people who trespassed, and then you have people who are violent. But I'll tell you this, if the FBI or other law enforcement agents were opening doors, breaking windows, and letting people in, I don't know how you can charge someone with trespass.
Well, Mike, in one video I saw, they've got this guy in handcuffs, and at least, again, I don't know this for certain, but that online they were claiming this guy's an FBI informant. They walk him over, he's got his hands behind his back, they undo it, and he fist bumps the guy and walks out. And I'm thinking to myself, some of these things don't add up. Like, I still don't understand who Ray Epps is. How does a guy who says on videotape, let's go to the Capitol, not face any charges?
Yeah, and here's something you should really ask, Sean. Of those 26 FBI agents, those are FBI paid contractors who were there on January 6th, the FBI says, 3 of them were working, the other 23 were not. How come none of those 23 who were not working, how come they were not charged with any crimes, right? Apparently, like 11 of them trespassed into the building. It seems like they're rounding up every grandma around America for the last 4 years. But none of those 23 paid FBI contractors have been charged with any crime, even though they were supposedly there off duty that day.
How important is it in light of this discussion that we're having now that Kash Patel becomes the next director of the FBI?
I love Kash Patel. He's a good friend of mine. He's going to go in there and bring much needed reforms to the FBI. And I'll tell you this, he's a former public defender. He's a former national security prosecutor. He got an award. He got awards from the Obama Justice Department for being a national security prosecutor. He was on the House Intel Committee as a senior lawyer. He worked in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. He worked in the White House National Security Council. He was the chief of staff at the Pentagon. No one is more qualified to go lead the FBI, and the FBI should be shaking at his boots because Kash Patel is not going to be one of their buddies. He's going to be buddies with the rank and file FBI directors who understand their job is to go after real criminals, violent crimes, migrant criminals who are like Venezuelan gangs who are terrorizing cities. But if you're one of these woke federal agents working with these woke prosecutors to go after your political enemies, say, for example, these January 6th prosecutions, these FBI agents may be finding themselves changing diapers on the southern border under FBI Director Kash Patel.
All right, I want to move over to the Supreme Court. I think one of the biggest legacies of President Trump's first term are the federal judges he appointed and the Supreme Court justices that he appointed. How much of an opportunity is he going to have during the second term to continue that effort?
Well, I mean, I would say this. We broke so much China in President Trump's first term, Senate China, when I was the chief counsel for nominations on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I broke so much China, and we were able to set up a conveyor belt of Trump's judicial nominees and got a near record number of them confirmed. Justice Gorsuch, my former boss, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Barrett, a near record number of lower federal court judges, including to the critically important federal courts of appeals. Unfortunately, President Biden was able to take advantage of that conveyor belt that we set up. And so he confirmed a record number of lower court judges. So there aren't a lot of spots to fill, but you also have, I think we have like 30 spots to fill, which is a good amount, but it's not going to be like the last time, right? But it's still critically important that we fill these spots. But you could see 1, 2, 3, maybe more retirements on the Supreme Court over the next 4 years.
So who would that be? Who would those 3 be? If in a perfect storm?
Well, if I name check these justices, Sean, then I get phone calls from their former law clerks saying,
all right, how about this? Are there any liberal justices among the ones that are there that you would say there's are at the age where, like, Sonia Sotomayor, is she somebody?
I mean, Sonia Sotomayor's up at an age bracket where she could consider retiring. And, I clerked on the Supreme Court. I don't say that disrespectfully. I actually adore her.
No, it's just a reality.
Yeah, I adore her personally. She's like one of my liberal aunts with whom I fight at Christmas. We fight all the time, but I still adore her. But look, I mean, just look at the ages of these justices.
Yeah.
If you just look at the past, he could appoint 1, 2, 3, maybe more justices in this next term. And I'll tell you this: the Article 3 project is going to be his leading outside defenders on these picks, like we have been before, like we have been on the lawfare. President Trump has said he's going to rely on the Article 3 project to
And he
help him
should.
pick his judges, and we look forward to doing that.
All right, last question I want to ask you, Mike Davis. What is the status? Like, there's been a flurry of lawfare aimed at Trump, trying to get him civilly, criminally. What's the bottom line status, quickly, about where it stands?
The bottom line is this: is the Biden Democrats threw everything they had at Trump. They tried to bankrupt him. They tried to throw him in prison for life 4 times for non-crimes. They tried to take him off the ballot illegally, unconstitutionally. They tried to take off his head twice when they underfunded his Secret Service protection. And guess what? Teflon Don survived all of this. He's going to beat all of this lawfare. He pulled the rabbit out of the hat like 6 different times to beat this. The Article 3 project was his key ally in this. And President Trump is not going to Rikers Island. He's going back to the White House.
But just lastly, is there anything he needs to worry about in the next 4 years legally, criminally or civilly?
I mean, they're going to try to do everything they can to go after him. But guess what? I'm going to strongly push the Trump 47 Justice Department to open criminal probes on this illegal lawfare and election interference. 18 USC Section 241, a big grand jury down in Fort Pierce, Florida. I hope that these Democrat operatives, lawyers, witnesses, agents, even judges, I hope they understand that nobody's above the law.
Awesome. Mike Davis, appreciate you and all that the Article 3 project does to support, frankly, just the law and what we're supposed to be doing. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank you, Sean.
You bet. All right, guys, what an interview with Mike Davis. But now I'm going to shift gears a little. You all have read these stories about drone attacks, what's going on, what the government knows, what they don't know. Guy Taylor is coming up right now. He is the national security editor at the Washington Times. He is the host of the Threat Status podcast newsletter. Unbelievable insight into what's happening. And I think you're going to be shocked about the discussion that we're having. This is a national security issue that's happening right now, and a level of incompetence in the government that I haven't seen in a while. So I want to bring in Guy, but before I do that, you guys have heard me talk about this before. There are still companies out there that I think I'm proud to support, and one of them is my friends over there at Wire to Fish Coffee. I love a good cup of coffee, especially a good iced coffee, right? Even in the winter, I have to admit it. And when I had everyone over for Thanksgiving, and I'm going to do it again at Christmas, I'm brewing a big pot of coffee. And you know what? The last time I did this, to a T, everybody was like, where is this coffee from? And I said, it's Wire to Fish Coffee. Now, I didn't tell everybody because not everyone's on the team with me, but I knew in the back of my mind, I felt great about the fact that Wire to Fish Coffee gives 25% of their profits to faith-based organizations and clean water initiatives. I know that when I buy Wire to Fish Coffee, I'm consistent with my values. I don't feel guilty because I'm helping some numbnut at Starbucks give to woke causes. No. Feel good about having a great cup of coffee, Arabica beans from Mexico and Guatemala, and know that you're doing the right thing by it. We voted in November for change. Vote with your wallet for change now. And to support a great company, go to wiretofishcoffee.com, wiretofishcoffee.com, right? It's the numeral 2, by the way. Use code WeCare for 15% off of your order. All right. Without further ado, I want to bring in Guy Taylor. He's the national security editor at the Washington Times and the host of the Threat Status podcast newsletter. Guy, welcome to the show.
Sean, it's so good to be here. How are you?
I'm great. I was drawn to something you wrote in your newsletter today, and I want to read it for everyone. The federal government has issued its most thorough verdict yet about the drone sightings in New Jersey in recent weeks. Some are law enforcement, some are commercial flights, some are hobbyists, and many are actually airplanes, helicopters, or even stars mistaken for drones, the government said. This is in your newsletter today. The joint statement from the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, the Federal Aviation Community, came after feds say that they deployed drone detecting technology and trained visual observers to get to the bottom of the mysterious flights. Officials confirmed there had been drone sightings over military bases, but they said They weren't worrying, said such incidents are not new. Guy, I don't even know where to start with this. Hey, people spy on us all the time. It's not new. How troubling is that?
It's a little bit troubling. I want to point out that the Pentagon, Patrick Ryder, the spokesman for the Pentagon, actually went a little bit further in a briefing on Tuesday night this week, where he basically said there's no indication that these things that are being spotted and filmed on cell phone cameras in New Jersey and other places on the East Coast are in any way tied to some secret U.S. military experiment or research. That, this is just what the FBI said in its joint statement. It could be a mixture of airplanes. It could be things mistaken for drones, and it could be some commercial drones. I think what we're seeing right now, given the gravity of this and the national security implications and all of the questions around it, is this is the federal government sort of buying time in recent days. It doesn't resolve the wider issue, which is that there's been this preponderance of basically unidentified flying objects, UFOs, over areas of the U.S. East Coast. And instead of jumping into conspiracy theories about that, I think there's some really sober, realistic ideas that we got to think about here. The first is how this story that's just snowballed because of social media, how did that happen? There's a kind of runaway train element to it without anyone in the government stepping forward until it was already a massive national story. So that's a bit of a problem politically for the Biden administration. I think also another simple idea that we got to think about here is that Americans are now living in a country saturated with commercial, private, and government operated drones. And the regulation of that current reality is inadequate right now at the federal, state, and local levels. There's a degree of chaos happening. And I think this whole situation is kind of a wake-up call. It's almost like frogs in a pot of water. Suddenly, a few of the frogs, in this case, thousands of people with cell phone cameras in New Jersey, are sounding the alarm that, hey, wait a minute, the water's getting really warm here. It's boiling. There are SUV-sized drones flying all over the place, and our government barely has a handle on it. Really doesn't have a handle on it. I think we also saw the House Intelligence Committee got a classified briefing on Tuesday this week from FBI and DOJ, other federal law enforcement officials, after which we saw several lawmakers in the House and the Senate suddenly awake to the fact that state and local municipalities apparently lack any legal authority to interdict mystery drones or just take them down somehow, whether with their own drones or shoot them down. Federal agencies currently do have this authority, but they haven't shot any of these mystery drones down. So that adds a layer to what are we really looking at here? We did see outgoing Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer Tuesday this week say, we got to have a bill on the table immediately to give authority to state municipalities, state police to interdict, take down one of these things and not halt doing it, which has been an issue with this. And then finally, Sean, I think another really sober idea here for Americans to think about is we're in this space of futuristic drone technology right now, and it's advancing very rapidly in the private sector. There are companies out there, U.S. companies and a handful of foreign companies that are making drones with AI brains that can fly without a human at the joystick, drones that can literally fly without GPS. They've got sensors, AI sensors on them that can read and detect the airspace and make movements to hide if they're being chased. That technology exists now. You could read about it. We've actually had a piece last week in our daily threat status newsletter that goes with our podcast talking about a company called Shield AI that's partnered with Palantir, two emergent defense contracting companies that are making drones that can circumnavigate the earth without GPS. So we're entering a new phase with this drone discussion, and there's more questions than answers, basically.
Well, Guy, the key word that you used in that description initially was could. It could, I mean, this is the government that you were referring to. It could be commercial. It could be, military. It could, the idea that they don't know, and yet at the same time are telling us that there's no threat doesn't comport. If you don't know what it is, how do you not know that it's a threat?
Yeah, well, I think this is what was kind of interesting with President-elect Trump's press conference earlier this
Yes.
week, where he pretty much called out the federal government and said, "How have you not taken one of these things down? How is it possible that the Pentagon doesn't know, if they are commercial drones, they're flying out of some warehouse somewhere, identify where that is, take the warehouse." And he's also saying, provocative things like, look, the feds know more than they're saying right now. And there's certainly a feeling in the mainstream media. I mean, we saw the Associated Press hammering the Pentagon yesterday, trying to get some kind of clarity or a statement on the record from Pat Ryder. They're like, look, are you really saying that the Pentagon is not doing this and has no idea what it is beyond this vague statement that, well, it could be some commercial drones, there might be some police drones, there might be some people mistaking stars, and there's a lot of small airplanes flying around at night. We need a situation where someone has the authority in as little with as little violence as possible to take one of these things out of the sky and examine it and then tell the American people what it is.
By the way, is it your understanding? I mean, I'm glad you referenced President Trump's comments there at his press conference. What I was told afterwards is that part of the reason he was so cagey is that the Biden administration is not granting him security briefings.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm kind of two minds on that because I've had sources tell me that they're offering and he doesn't want to take them. So I think there's always a politicization that goes on in the transition over what is he being told and what isn't he. And maybe he does want to hear more, and he feels like it's not coming fast enough, so he throws a jab.
Or he doesn't trust them.
Or he doesn't trust them. Overall, though, Sean, I thought the transition process could be a lot rockier than it is. I think that you're getting generally positive statements that finally the different disclosure papers have been signed and there's action in place on various fronts and national security. And then it's just a matter of getting through the holidays here and into January. And you've got an administration. Like, this is what's so interesting about Trump. It's his second term and he's coming in clearly with momentum where he wants the nominations moving quickly so that we can get past this back and forth of are they sharing information or not.
All right. So I am a co-host of this show in the morning on my YouTube channel called The Morning Meeting. We invite people to come on, ask their questions, share their insights. There was a gentleman this morning who claims to be a drone expert from Idaho. He came on the show and he poked a ton of holes in the government statement. And the bottom line is he was talking about how the fact that they note they're sending visual observers. He was sort of questioning why, that's stupid at night. You're staring up there thinking somehow you're going to figure it out. But the bottom line is, this is what he said that I found shocking and scary. The government is unable to protect us at this moment from these drones. And he specifically referenced the inauguration and said the dirty little secret is they can't protect us from big events. He cited an NFL game. He cited an airport where they've been closing. They closed them down. The NFL game was paused. And he said, the dirty secret the government doesn't want you to know right now is that they cannot protect you, especially at big events like the inauguration. Do you share the assessment right now that the government not only doesn't know what they are, but has no ability to protect us?
I do. And I'm not going to sit here and just call for bigger government and more regulation, but clearly, as I've said, we're in a changing space in the drone landscape right now. There are more of them. They're more sophisticated. There are more private actors. Is there even cohesion around what different state police in different states have on hand? Is there a clear list of what the assets are? Number one. Number two, I'll tell you kind of an interesting story. Last week or a week and a half ago, I was at the Reagan National Defense Forum, just north of Los Angeles, Simi Valley. You may have been to this before, right? It's at the Reagan Presidential Library. Amazing event where you get all these Pentagon officials and contractors together. And there's a stealth fighter, an old stealth fighter on a pole outside the library with an amazing view of the mountains outside of Simi Valley. And while people were standing at the start of the Reagan National Defense Forum, a SUV-sized drone flew within eyesight of this scene. And people actually got a little bit of, it was daytime, got a little bit of cell phone footage of it. I didn't, and I haven't, so I can't offer it, but I saw it on a few other people's phones. It looked like it was a piloted drone, but here we are at a gathering of like the top US security officials at a presidential library, and nobody seemed to have an explanation as to what was that. It just kind of came and went by, and I've seen no press reporting on it. So yeah, I'm concerned that there could be some kind of an incident. If you go back as well 5 or 6 years, you'll remember when President-elect Trump was in office the first time around, there was also an attempted drone strike, an attempted assassination of Venezuelan
Yes,
socialist.
that was what this
strongman
Idaho guy
Nicolas
brought up as
Maduro.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine that technology advanced dramatically in 5 years. We're talking about an accelerated advanced technology space, tons of companies working on this, lots of products out there without much regulation. The Pentagon is trying through you've heard of the replicator program, which is to try and accelerate the mass production of drones, advanced drones that can be used by US forces. But it's a space that's not very regulated.
Well, the one point that this gentleman this morning made is that in each of the circumstances, the Venezuelan thing, the NFL thing, and the airport situation, in every one of those cases, they still haven't figured out who the drone operator is.
That's right. I think some of that has to do with where we're going with advanced artificial intelligence computer chips that are in the brains of these drones. We're not talking about some sentient computer that can do these things. We're not there yet, right? But we are talking about drones that can read the environment and make moves without somebody in a room somewhere miles away making all of the movements. That's the stage that we're getting to. So I think until the government is able to take one of these things down and figure out exactly what it is and get to this story's not going away. It's just going to continue to grow. And I think you're going to maybe see some government action to try and address what the capabilities are of local and state law enforcement to get out in front of federal law enforcement if you have a situation like we've had in New Jersey in the past month.
Guy, I got about 60 seconds left with you. Let me just ask you this. TikTok's fate right now, supposedly they're going to get sold off. They have to vanquish their U.S. interest by, I think it's January 19th. The inauguration's obviously the 20th. At that press conference, we mentioned President Trump said he had a, quote, soft spot for TikTok. I believe it still is a national security threat. Based on what you know, what's the future of TikTok look like?
It's a great question. I interviewed Raja Krishnamurthy for our Threat Status podcast. It was actually a video a couple of months ago. He's one of the Democrats that authored the bill to force a sale of TikTok from ByteDance, a Chinese company that's basically tied to the Ministry of State Security, Chinese intelligence. And, you know, he was hopeful that there could be an awakening, an awareness on both parties and across the American public that the U.S. government should do something. But look, who's going to actually make it so that you can no longer get TikTok on your phone without it becoming a massive First Amendment issue? It's going to be Google and Apple, right? So does the government have the appetite? Does the coming Trump administration have the appetite to try and muscle those companies? And also, does it have the back channel diplomatic capability to perhaps engineer a sale of TikTok to a buyer, perhaps someone who's got big business in China? I'm thinking Elon Musk. I think that's on a lot of people's minds, but this is a difficult case. And I think it's just going to be big in the headlines because there's now a TikTok Supreme Court case coming. TikTok is challenging it. But I'm with you, Sean, personally. I've been writing about this at Threat Status in our newsletter all the time, daily almost, which is the fact that TikTok is like heroin for young people. I mean, you and I didn't get Instagram until we were grown-ups. And anybody who's got kids knows it's basically like heroin for young people. I mean, they get sucked right into it. And it's not, should there be government regulation? A lot of these things come down to, can you have effective government regulation without politicizing it to a point and to address a foreign adversary that owns this thing? And there's clear documentation that this platform is tied back to Chinese intelligence. So
Right.
you got disinformation operations happening. I think the TikTok thing is, it's gonna be something we're all talking about in the next few months.
Agreed. Guy Taylor, we'll put the link to Threat Status, your newsletter there at the Washington Times in the notes for the show on YouTube, etc. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it, guys. Listen, tomorrow, amazing panel breaks down all the information, plus Friday, Victor Davis Hanson. I've got some great info on the inaugural, all sorts of things. Again, I can't get you tickets. I can explain how you might be able to get them. Go to SeanSpicer.com. Sign up for the newsletter. I would appreciate it if you want to become a VIP member or gift it to someone. What a Christmas gift or a Hanukkah gift to give to somebody. Give them my newsletter. You can do that all there at SeanSpicer.com. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
If you enjoyed this
on the Sean
content, make
Spicer
sure
Show.
to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.